Hello and welcome to my channel. So in this video, I'm going to take you through some of the traps that you find most of the project managers they are in. And these tips are very, very important. And I would encourage you to watch this video all the way up to the end so that you can appreciate and understand some of the traps that you have to avoid as a project manager. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Oscar Mbira. I'm a certified program and project manager. In this video, I'm going to take you through the 4 traps that you should always avoid as a project manager. So let's get started. So have you ever heard someone saying, I'm a certified person, I'm a certified project manager, so there's nothing else that you can tell me? Have you ever heard someone saying, I've done my education and I know better than you, so you need to do what I'm following, you need to do what I'm saying? Have you ever heard someone saying, this is what the PM book says, so let's follow it and make sure it's done? Have you ever heard someone saying, I need this to be done according to these principles. If it's not done, then you've not done your job, probably you'll be fired. So these are some of the traps that you normally find with project managers. And these are some of the traps that you should always avoid as a project manager. So in this video, I'm going to cover these 4 traps that you should always try to avoid if you're a project manager. So let's move on. I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe button, and the notification button so that you're the first person to be notified each time a new video is uploaded on this channel. It will also help the channel to grow. It will also help the channel to produce more videos like this one. So, project management is actually a journey. You might be asking me, Oscar, why are you saying it's a journey? Project management involves you from starting to think about project manager or project management to going to mastering project management or being a project manager. So you might be asking, Oscar, what are these stages in this journey? I can quickly mention them to you. One of them is you need to do your research first to check if you really want to be a project manager. You educate yourself also so that you can use the domain language in project management. You can also certify or get certification for yourself to prove that you have mastered project management. You can also practice. That is to apply your theory into practice, and then you need to master. So there are so many project managers who have gone through this journey of being a project manager, but at the end of the day, they become trapped. So you might be asking, Oscar, what do you mean by trapped? You see, like any other discipline, project management does not have an end. Why am I saying that? You might find that you are now getting new technologies. So as a project manager, you don't need to learn. You cannot say, I was doing this in the 90s, 80s, or around the 2020s, and therefore nothing else is going to change. Project tools, they're going to change. Even methodologies, some of them, they're going to improve. Okay, they're not going to change as such, but they're going to improve. And also people management theories, experience, and other things, they're going to change. So there are certain traps which we can classify that project managers can fall into. So the first trap we're going to cover 4 of them. So the first one is going to be over-processing, okay? Then the second one is credential gatekeeping. We'll discuss more about that. Then the third one is where theory meets reality or practice, okay? And then the last one is reaching comfort level zone or comfort zone ceiling. So we're going to go through these 4 items for you to appreciate what you should avoid as traps in project management. So let's move on. So in project management, one of the first traps to avoid is over-processing. I can explain more on this. I've seen so many project managers, especially the ones who have just certified, and then they're lucky to be deployed into managing a project. The first problem you face is over-processing because there's too much theory in their head. They've heard about this template. They also have heard about this process. They've heard about this document that must be done. So they are trapped in over-processing. Even where you are not supposed to be applying a specific logic, they will try to push it so that it's done. Where you are not supposed to apply a specific process, because they've learned about it, they always try to push to include that process. So over-processing is one of the challenges or one of the traps that you should always avoid as a project manager. And you should always make sure that you come out of that trap. Otherwise, it will damage your reputation. It will also damage the product. So in this section of the video, I want us to go through the signs that shows that probably you might be over-processing in a project environment. Some of these signs, you might even concur with me, I've already experienced them. Some of them, they might appear very new. So we're going to look at the signs that you're over-processing, and then we're also going to look at how do you fix that. So these are the specific signs that might show that you're over-processing in your project. The first one you'll see is someone having a plan which is longer than the project. Honestly, that's not how things should work. A plan should be linked to the project. And this day and age where we now have artificial intelligence or AI, you find that most people, they don't take time to analyze the output of the AI. So what they normally do is just give a prompt to the artificial intelligence tool, they get a response, then they use it. There are so many other AIs these days which can even create for you a project plan. So someone will just give a prompt, they get a plan, they start sharing with the team or stakeholders without looking at exactly what is required in the project. That is why it's normally advisable that you tailor the project environment for a specific process. You don't need to take one by one. There are certain documents which might work in construction project, they might not work in software projects. There are certain documents that might work when you are renovating a building. There are certain documents which are not applicable. It's not just document, even document templates and also processes which are also not applicable when you're doing research. So it is always advisable that you tailor the environment of the project, you tailor your knowledge, you tailor your documentation, your processes to the requirement of the project. So how do we fix that? Not every project requires a 50-page plan or 50-page project charter. No. There are certain projects you can quickly achieve even with a 2-page document, or even 1-page document or 1-page plan. So you need to tailor your experience, your knowledge, your documentation, your templates to the project environment. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for you to be successful in that project. So the second item or the second sign that probably you might be over-processing, you find most of your team members, they are spending more time either reporting or completing some documents instead of doing the work. Projects can be delivered through execution of project work, execution of project plans. Whether it's procurement plan, whether it's scope management plan, whether it's cost management plan, all these plans, they can only be achieved by execution. So you should always make sure that most of your team members, especially the ones who are going to execute the work packages, they are actually spending more time doing the work than doing project documentation or even doing reporting. So this is also another sign that probably you are over-processing in your project. People are spending more time on documents. People are spending more time on reporting. People are spending even more time in meetings instead of spending more time doing the work. So how do we fix this? Normally, for small projects, reporting can be even verbal, okay? These days, there are so many platforms you can even use for reporting. For example, you can use your WhatsApp, or you can even use Teams meeting, Zoom, and so on and so forth. So this is how you need to avoid that. Try to make sure that where it's necessary, okay, you don't need to overburden the team with a lot of documentation, with a lot of reporting. That is very, very important to consider. Then the next one is, this one I've seen in some of my project experience, where the team, or any decision that is to be made, you find that it will require a change request. Even a minor decision, it will require a change request. I can tell you, that's one of the signs that you are actually over-processing. Say, for example, I can give you a burning example. Maybe one of the requirements was for the teller to be able to issue amounts up to say $100. Just an example. And then the teller maybe requests that instead of 100, can we put it to 90? It's just a small change. It could be parameterized so that the teller can even change on their own when the developers are not there. You find some project manager, because probably it's a fixed price project, they are not flexible. Anything that has to come, it has to come through a change request. So you might be asking, what is a fixed price? A fixed price is just a type of contract that you can have in a project. In a project, actually, you have 3 types of contract: fixed price, cost reimbursement, and also time and material. If you want to understand more about the different types of project contracts, I've created a video on project contracts or agreements. I'll also leave a link in the description below. You can also check it on my channel. So, some of these signs is every small or minor change. I'm not talking about gold plating. I'm not talking about scope creep. There are some minor changes which you are, as a project manager, you make a decision that since it's not going to affect the timelines, it's not going to affect probably the cost, then it can be done. I'm not saying you should accept scope creep, but there are some minor changes, especially if you are working on a software development project. There are some minor changes which do not have a serious impact on the deliverable, and they do not warrant a full-fledged change request. Although change request is a mandatory item to do, especially when you're doing predictive project management. So that is one. So that is the other one. The next one now is you have layered approval process. What do I mean by this? Maybe something that would require even just a team manager, or even a project manager, or even a program manager to approve. You might end up with 6 or 4 layers. You want team member, team manager, project manager, program manager, portfolio manager, sponsor, everyone. So it could be one of the signs that shows that you are actually over-processing. You cannot have such a high number of approvals for small changes. So it's actually very important that for some of these projects, you tailor or you customize the way you do some of these approvals. Maybe from your previous project, you actually had these 5, but it might not apply to the current project. So it's a matter of using common sense and proper judgment, just to make sure that you don't over-process when it comes to some of these approvals. Then the next one that you see is most of the stakeholders, if they start dreading your reporting, then it could be a sign that you are over-processing. Then a meeting which was supposed to take 20 minutes or 30 minutes for updates, it's taking 3 hours because you have so much to update your stakeholders. You document too much. So you also need to tailor based on the stakeholder requirements. Remember, stakeholder management is very important. You need to understand even how to communicate their needs, okay? Even the methods or even the technology of communication. If you want to understand more about stakeholder management, I've created a video on stakeholder management. You can watch it on my channel. I'll also leave a link in the description below. So if you find that each time you want to engage your stakeholders, there's a fear that you're going to give them too much information or unnecessary information, it could be one of the signs that you are actually over-processing. So how do you fix that? Make sure you understand the stakeholder needs, especially when you do your stakeholder engagement from the beginning of the project all the way up to the end. Understand their needs in terms of information, understand even timing of their information, okay? Understand even the detail of their information. And in some cases, just using a template to report is very important, but don't be trapped by templates again. Template is just a guideline or a guidance. It's not a cage where you have to get in and you have to do something there. There are certain sections of the template you can even take them out if they do not apply to that particular project. So it's quite important that if you start seeing your stakeholders dreading your reporting, then it could be another sign that probably you are even over processing. Okay. Then the last one that you might see is If you find yourself saying, just follow this process, this is how things should be done, without clarity, it could be another sign that you're probably over-processing in the project environment. Following a process, it's not an issue. But what is very important is, does it apply to the current project? Is it going to help to achieve the objectives and the goals of that project? So it's quite important that you also make those considerations when it comes to over-processing. These are the main signs of over-processing in a project environment. And I can tell you, even from my experience, I've seen it from my counterparts of project manager when I'm working with my clients, you find that most of them, they are trapped in this over-processing mentality. Everything that has to be done, they think about what they learned in their certification. Anything that needs to be done, they think about their online course. And then they even come up with a very nice and very long template to say, if ever you want this item to be changed, this is what you are supposed to complete. In some cases, you're even given a number of documents or templates. For one process, you might be given 6 or 7 templates to complete. That is, if the project does not have the Project Management Information System, PMIS. So, always try to avoid over-processing in a project environment. Make sure you are tailoring your processes, your templates, your documents to meet the project goals, not to satisfy what was said in one of the online courses or in one of the certification processes. That is very, very important. So, in this section of the video, I'm going to take you through some of the matches that you might have, a match between a process and a project. So let's go through them one by one, as you can see on the screen. So the first one is if something that is very macro, say for example, is something that is 2 weeks, you are expected probably to have minimum in terms of project level, and the documentation is 1 page is enough, or even a task list is also enough. Then in terms of meetings, you just have one brief meeting or kickoff meeting, because this is macro, 2 weeks time. Say for example, you want to paint a house, it's going to take you 2 weeks. Why should you have 10 meetings or 20 meetings for that? So one kickoff meeting brief will be enough. Then the second one is if you have small projects, maybe 2 to 6 weeks or 2 to 8 weeks, you might want also to have a very light process level. And a simple charter plus a brief plan is enough. And you can only have weekly stand-up meetings. So that is also applicable. If something is medium, 2 to 6 or to 8 weeks, or to 8 months, 2 to 8 months, you need a standard process level, because that's a bit longer. 2 to 6 months, it's long. Then you also have a full plan plus risk register, and also you can have bi-weekly meeting status reporting. Then you might also have some large projects which might run for more than 6 months. I was involved in one project which went about 4 years. The other one was 5 years. So this is where probably you might need the full project or process level application. And in most cases, you find most of these long projects, they also have a number of stakeholders. And also, in this section of the video, we're going to cover the second trap, which is gatekeeping of credentials. You might be asking, Oscar, what does that mean? So credentials are very, very important. Like your certifications, they are very, very important. But they should not be a blocker, or they should not stand as a wall between you, your stakeholders, and your team members. You might be asking so many questions, but you're going to understand as we go through the video. So once you have attained your credentials, it's just proof that you have acquired project management knowledge. But there are certain cases where probably it might not even apply. And you should not always be guarding against your credentials. So you should not always be guarding against your credentials. So we are going to go through the signs of credential keeping. If you go through these signs, it means you're also doing a credential keeping, which is also a trap that must be avoided as a project manager. So the first one is you always try to use your certificates to win an argument. I've seen it with one of the project managers. When there's a discussion and a project member is actually presenting their own case, Instead of focusing on the discussion, understanding actively what the other member is saying, or to have even empathy as to what the other member is saying. You hear someone saying, no, I've got a doctorate in this subject, so what can you tell me? I've got a master's in this subject, so what can you tell me? I'm the chairman of this particular certification community, so what can you tell me? So if you find yourself actually using those statements, it means you are now using credentials to win argument. It's not good for the project. So how do we resolve that? It's actually recommended that you become an active listener. Situations can differ. Strategies can differ from scenario to scenario. So even if you're educated, you might find that scenario, you've never seen it during your education period, and therefore it might require different opinions and different views. So how do you resolve that? Always make sure that you have active listening. When it's not necessary, don't make reference to your certifications. Look at the problem, come up with solution, choose the solution, implement and review the solution. That is what is very, very important. It's not. And also, one of the signs that might show that you might be gatekeeping your credentials. You hear someone saying, I'm a certified PMP, so what can you tell me? I've gone through 180 questions. So most of the project scenarios have been covered. It means you're now focusing more on your credentials than the situation on the ground, and that is not advisable. So it is always advisable that you listen to your team. Ideas, they come from anywhere. I can tell you, there's no one who has got monopoly over knowledge. So ideas can come from anyone. So if you spend more time, which I normally do in my project, I spend more time as a listener than someone who is talking. When you listen, you get different views, and even your decision making is actually better. Okay? Another sign which might show that you are actually gatekeeping your credentials is you try not to listen to someone you assume or you know is not certified in project management. I can tell you that's a big blunder. The team is the gold mine of lessons learned, experience, knowledge, and so on and so forth. So even if someone is not certified, listen to what they are saying. Convince them that whatever they are saying is not applicable. Convince them that whatever they've said, they've taken it into consideration, you're going to polish it, and then you're going to apply it. Don't take your qualification as something to discredit other people. It's not good for a project. I've seen so many project managers getting trapped in such scenarios. So you should always avoid that, and you should always listen to everyone, give everyone a chance. Let me give you a good example from what I do in my projects. I normally have brainstorming sessions. And during brainstorming sessions, everyone is equal in terms of idea contribution. I can tell you, people have different ideas. Some of them, you might not even have thought about them, but you can hear someone saying, oh, you're studying this one, why can't you do it this way? Or I've seen it in some other continent, some other country. You do it this way, you see? So it's always good that you listen. Then another sign that might show that probably you are now you're gatekeeping your credentials is to start using some acronyms or abbreviations which people are not familiar with. You see, communication is about letting people understand or get your message. So you have to be articulate. What's the purpose of coming up with some acronyms which are not common to everyone? And you don't even explain them. So if ever you want to use the acronyms, the first thing is you define it, make people understand it, then relate it to what you are saying. Otherwise, just saying some words and then you move on does not make sense to anyone. And it shows that you just want to show people that you have learned something, but it probably does not contribute to the current situation. And that is not good if you're a project manager. You should not be trapped in that particular scenario. Always make sure that your communication is very clear. If ever you're going to use any abbreviations, expand them for the people to know, and then relate them to the point that you're trying to raise in that particular discussion. That is very, very important, okay? So, the other sign I've seen, this one I've seen with so many project managers, is if you find your people are intimidated to approach you for any discussion, or they're intimidated even to challenge you if you are doing something not right, then there's a problem. It means you are using your credentials to scare people from discussing with you, which is not good. People should feel free. I can tell you some of the risks that you can pick from the project. They actually come from the team members. They come from any stakeholder. So imagine you have blocked them because you think you know better than everyone else because of some qualifications or some certifications that you are holding. No one is going to come to you and let you know of any risk that is imminent. We normally call it proximity in project management. If you want to understand more about project management, risk management, I've created a video on how to understand risk management in project environment. So the other trap that you must always avoid is matching theory and reality. Especially when you're coming from some certification, there's a temptation to think that whatever you were learning as theory is applicable everywhere. The general advice, or what I can advise from my end, is always make an assessment of the situation before you confine yourself to a specific theory or specific template or process. Because in most cases, reality and theory, they might not match. So let us go through the signs that you might be failing to match theory and reality. So the first one is you want to enforce Scrum prints on every construction program. In some cases, a certain methodology might not work, so you should not enforce it. Look at whether you need Agile or whether you need a traditional Waterfall approach. Don't always say we need sprints. In some cases, in some projects, it might work. In some projects, it might not work. Then the second one, the other sign that you might be failing to bridge between theory and reality, is you continuously say or refer to PM book. PM book says this process, PM book says this, and so on and so forth. Or Prince 2 says this, and so on and so forth. You cannot always be making that specific reference. There are cases where that reference works, but there are cases where you have to make an assessment. Is it really going to work, or you're just making reference to PM book, or you're just making reference to Prince 2? So there must be some relationship between what you are saying, the theory you're talking about, and what needs to be done on the ground. So it's one of the signs that shows that probably you are now failing to link theory and reality. Then the other sign that I've seen also with other project manager is always saying, we learned this in class and it must be done. So that is theory, okay? There are some things you might learn, but they may not work. Let me give you a good example. When it comes to what are called organizational process assets, or PA, these are like organizational documents and templates, processes, procedures, and policies. Maybe in your previous organization, there was a certain way of doing things. And then when you join this other organization, there's a different way of doing things. So it is very apparent that you also see or look at the context or the environment in which you are working in. You cannot always say, because I learned about this, it should always be applicable. When you are learning, there are certain things which apply to certain scenarios, certain industries, certain projects. There are others which do not apply at all. So you should be able to distinguish what is applicable and what is not applicable. You cannot always say, because PM book said this, because Prince 2 manual said this, then we should be able to do this thing. That's one of the signs that shows that you are failing to match reality and also the theory that you have learned. So the other sign that you might be failing to meet or to match reality and also the theory, you start ignoring industry standards. You know, every industry, say for example, it's manufacturing, software development, it's construction. They have certain standards or certain ways of doing things. Some they want to call them benchmarks. They have certain ways of doing things. And some of these ways of doing things, they are based on the practical experience or past projects. And they might not match one-to-one with theory that you were studying in your certification. So you find some project managers, they start ignoring those standards, focusing more on theory. That's also another sign that you are actually failing to match reality and theory. So how do you resolve that? Make an assessment. Bring your theory, bring industry standards, bring the situation on the ground. Make a judgment. There's something called expert judgment. You should make expert judgment to see what is applicable and also what is not applicable. Then the last sign that you might also see between theory and reality is a methodology becomes a goal instead of an outcome. Okay? So you find because someone has done Scrum certification, someone has done Agile certification, someone has done Lean certification or Kanban certification. So they always think this is the way to do things. If you don't do it, it appears as if you have not done your work. So they are now prioritizing methodology as a goal than the outcome. So how do you resolve this? Always make sure that you focus on the outcome, project objectives, project goals, more than methodology. There are some methodology steps that might work somewhere. There are others that might fail everywhere. So you still need to make that particular judgment. So the last trap that we are going to go through in this video is what is called comfort zone ceiling. Ceiling, it means you have reached a certain level where you cannot go beyond that. So what do we mean by comfort zone ceiling? As a project manager, you should not reach a point where you cannot learn anything more. You cannot accepting anything new. You cannot accepting something that you have not seen before. As a project manager, you should always be flexible, not rigid. And how do you become flexible? If there's something that is coming, especially from stakeholders or from team members, that you have not seen before, you first assess it, assess in terms of the impact on the project. And if it's something that you have not seen, but it's applicable, it works, then you need to apply it. The best situation or solution is what works in a project. It's not about what you have learned. It's not about what was said by a very powerful stakeholder. It's what works. So there are also certain signs that you've actually reached your comfort zone ceiling. One of them is you always tell your team, we have always been doing it this way. You can't do it this way. I'm telling you, as a project manager, you can't do that. It kills creativity in the project. People should be free to come up with innovations, ideas, any level of improving current process. But if you find yourself saying, this is what you have always been doing it, and then you should do it, it means you have reached your comfort level ceiling. You need to break that and go further. So it's quite important that you make that decision. Then the second one that you see is when you are reaching your comfort level ceiling, it's very difficult for you to even understand or even to learn new tools, platforms, or ways of doing things. You want things to be done the old way that you've been doing. This day and age where we have technology, it's very difficult for you to maintain a specific tool without changing it over so many years. This day of AI, there are so many tools, good and better than the old ones, that are coming in. There are so many platforms coming in for communication, for resolution, for conference, for meetings, and so on and so forth, like your Zoom, your Teams. So if you find yourself not willing to change the tools that you have been using, or the processes or the platforms that you have been using, it means you are now trapped in your comfort zone ceiling. You need to break that ceiling and start getting some other things which are better. Then the next one is you find some junior project managers. They are knowing better tools or current tools than you. So you should always be upgrading yourself. If you find you have 20 years, 30 years experience, someone who is 3 or 4 years experience as a project manager, they know more tools than you. It means you have reached your comfort zone ceiling. You need to break it. You need to learn more tools. You need to learn more how to do other things. So that's another sign. Then the other one is, assuming you have gone for almost 2 years without reading any project management, a book, article, or even post, or even watching any project management YouTube video, it means you have now reached your comfort zone ceiling. You will not learn so many things that could be changing within a year or 2 years. So as a project manager, what is advisable is to always have continuous learning. Always be learning something as a project manager. Things, they change, processes, they change, people, they change, environments, they change. So you cannot go for 2 years without reading. Actually, as a project manager, you should be either writing articles on project management, attending seminars, project management, even doing some tutoring, teaching people about project management. That's also very important, because the moment you talk to people, they give you questions, it makes you think about a better way of doing things. And that is very, very important. The other sign you might also see is that the industry, it might be evolving, and your methods of doing things, they're not evolving. I can tell you previously, 10, 15 years ago, we used to do project planning manually. We start from scratch everything, and then you finish. This day and age, there are also so many tools that you can start from. For example, if you want to use AI, you prompt to give you a framework, and then within that framework, you take item by item, prompting it to give you more and more. And it takes less time. We used to take 2-3 months just to do one plan. These days, you can do it in hours because of the use of AI. So as the industry is also evolving, make sure your methods of doing project management, they are also evolving. If they don't evolve, it means your ceiling has to be broken. You have reached somewhere where you think you're not comfortable. You need to break and then come out of that. Then, the other sign that you might see, I've seen it with other projects, is discomfort becomes a danger, not a growth. If someone is going to interrogate you, to ask you as a project leader so many questions, and this person is actually a junior, a stakeholder, or even a project member, and then you find it very annoying, it means you've reached a point where you're not flexible enough to accept new ideas. You've reached a point where you're not flexible enough to entertain even a better or different way of looking at things. So it is very, very important that you should always look at these signs so that you don't get trapped. If you want me to create additional videos based on what we have discussed in this video, or maybe there's a concept or idea that is not clear to you and you need more information about it, you can reach out to me, or you can let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching.